I always think of the world of the individual as a set of tunnels parallel to each other. The individual, depending on where he's born, education, career, and lifestyle, will fit into one of the tunnels, pre-made tunnels. Then they will go through their lives, never realizing there are parallel tunnels. That's tunnel vision, but it's also tunnel thinking. People, once they're in the tunnel and they've accepted it, when the curiosity of childhood ceases and the media and daily routine takes over, they stop questioning for themselves and are then trained that everything they need to know will be told to them by the authorized media. This didn't happen by chance. The understanding of the psychological tunnel syndrome was known in ancient times too by philosophers, that leisure class that had time to think after they'd been educated in the old ancient mysteries, which to a great extent were devoted to how people and peoples can be controlled. They are sciences, in other words. Sciences accumulated over millennia of observation on humanity. Sciences which were never forgotten or lost. But sciences, because they depend on using these techniques of tunnel creation for the general people, were never shared with the general people. We find today, for instance, that after the events, long after events, a new, different, and often truer version of reality or a past event is given to us by the government of the day, with no explanation. It's just that a generation or more has passed. Those who are growing up in the present don't care about the big tricks, the big cons that were pulled in the past over the people. It's also the revelation of the method, a form of legality, of the rules by which an elite go by. Very few people have the ability to think outside of their tunnel once they have passed a certain stage in growing up. Growing up is a difficult time for most people, especially today with the dysfunctional families, the new definitions of families, or no family at all, where the state brings you up in foster care. A very old idea which was promoted for a long time, even from Plato's day, in the secret societies of his day, which were aristocratic societies. They were not for the commoner. The commoner didn't get into the societies until the 1700s, when the low-level masonry was created, because a middle class would be necessary to manage an industrial age. It also became a sifting ground to find out who could truly keep secrets, who didn't mind that the public were being fooled and conned at every turn. Those who would take the rewards and keep their mouths shut and turn a blind eye. Some people are born into this world with the idea that things are simply wrong, which is shocking to those who are born into the world thinking so much is wrong. Most people don't know this. Those who do know it are shocked to find out that others don't know it. Those who don't know what the problem is, they simply know it's wrong, often have very active minds. Because they're not brought into those who know, the ruling elite. They don't know the answers, they just know everything's wrong. They tend to rebel in small, ineffective ways, or become, which is more the rule, self-destructive. They turn to drugs or alcohol to quieten their minds and to try and fit in with a peer group, which doesn't work for them if they're truly capable of understanding the big picture, which few actually have. It's always a shock to find out how conditioned people really are, and yet every day everybody makes decisions in their own personal lives that sets their character. It sets their character, concretizes it often until they never change really from the age of 20 or 21 right to the day they die. It's fixed, and yet life is supposed to be an ongoing process of maturity and wisdom. It doesn't work that way with most people, especially today in an age where we are under a scientific indoctrination from birth to death. I always remember little quotes that I read as I go through libraries when I was very young, trying to find out what was behind the unease I sensed all around me. The Marquis of Halifax, in a book, I think it was The Moral Thoughts and Reflections, said, "A man that steps aside from the world and hath leisure to observe it without interest or design, thinks all mankind as mad as they think him for not agreeing with them in their mistakes." In other words, you have to step outside of all conditioning, all sticky thinking, because conditioning creates sticky thinking. It creates formats of thought that you're supposed to fall into when you ask certain questions, since they've already given you the pat answers in the past. You have to step out of the world to see it as it really is. And that is not an easy task for most people. Most cannot do it. The conditioning is too great. They'd rather believe the 6 o'clock news is true. They've been trained to believe. They're being told all there is to know. But their betters have decided for them what they're being told is all they need to know for the present. Pythagoras, who was only one of various revolutionaries trained in Egypt, because Egypt exported adepts who went out to foment revolutions, always with the same technique of recruiting the younger, brighter ones, sifting them out through processes of questions, answers, and long periods of silence, because those who cannot listen are of no use. Someone who constantly jumps in with questions as higher truths are being explained to them is not listening to the answers. You watch first, you look, you listen, as they say in higher masonry. It also shows you that a person who constantly asks the questions before the previous answers have been finished are really wanting justification of the answers they already believe in. It's like those who say they're seeking truth, but are in reality shopping for a religion or a belief in which they already have chosen. That is not someone who's looking for truth. With always the understanding that most people to the elite are classed as base people, creatures of instinct. The profane is what they call them, the masses, etc., the unwashed. Therefore they would be guided like children are guided. That's why you have good shepherds in every religion, which means the people are the sheep. Sheep are very dumb animals. Deception is the rule in all of this. And Norman Dodd found out from the Ford Foundation by the guy at the top who told him that apart from accepting orders from the White House, and always had been, not the Congress, that the idea was to change society so vastly and greatly in America, but also for the West, though, as to comfortably merge the Soviet system with that of the Western system. Therefore, they were funding all groups, all conflicting groups, because through conflict you have compromise down the road. Compromise is a stepping stone towards the next part. Then more conflict, then more compromise, the next part. That's how society is guided. The ancients used to say that if you could understand nature with its opposites, the dialectic, and the opposite of summer is winter, the opposite of spring is autumn, then you could predict the next stage that the public would go through. In other words, you bring them from a spring, you bring them to the summer, you guide them to the fall, you guide them to the winter. Conflict is necessary when you have an agenda, a planned agenda, and you're dealing with such a variety of mentalities in society, a variety of interests, conflicting interests. And that was a reason given to Dodd that those much higher than the runners of the foundation, the directors of them, and all the other foundations, said there were too many conflicting interests that could not be reconciled. Therefore, a supra-guiding government, you might say, was really in charge. What they didn't tell him is that it had been charged for an awful long time, because in the 1700s, in the higher Masonic books, they wrote about this. They wrote a lot about it in the French books of the 1700s, of how to guide the world into this new efficient society that would come to be. They knew that personal interests, group interests, and even business interests would conflict. Therefore, there could only be one dominant minority, as there already was, even in the 1700s. Only by helping each other, not by being stupid and turning the other cheek to the psychopaths, because there's plenty of them in this today's world, in all strata of society. Will this course alter? And it won't alter for everyone. People are deciding their futures. Even the ignorant are deciding their future. Because we all have personal choices daily. And the beginning of all understanding comes with reflection upon oneself. And when you ask, who am I? What am I? that's the path that leads you to questioning everything. Because you make decisions all along in your search for yourself. And your decisions do affect others, even in your personal life, all the time. Ultimately, you don't need a God to forgive you. The hardest thing that people have in life, if they still have some morality, natural morality or conscience in them, the hardest thing is being able to forgive yourself. Gods can always forgive. So don't fight with each other. Conflict is managed by intelligent people who understand the sciences. Those who follow the leaders in ethnic groups, racial groups, creeds, be very careful, because the survival of those people over there also defines your own survival. When we don't care or have empathy for people who are being blown up or bombed elsewhere in the world or starved to death, we're condemning ourselves, because one day it will come round to you. And who will be there to weep for you or help? That is part of the survival instinct, to help others in distress. It truly is, because as you help others, you help yourself. Maybe not immediately, in the same way, but it's the best insurance policy for survival there is. I speak to those who are looking and searching. I hope to fill in the gaps that have led you to where you are, give you the information. And it's uplifting to see young people here and there across the world who are catching on and maybe diverted from going into the circle, the round and round circle of trying to quieten their minds by drugs or alcohol or destructive means. For myself and Hamish, it's good night, and may your God or your gods go with you.